Imagine starting a movement that gathers thousands of followers, performing miraculous healings in broad daylight, and then looking at the few people who actually figure out who you are and ordering them to keep it a secret. That is the exact scenario playing out in the Gospel of Mark. It is the earliest and most action-packed of the 4 historical accounts of Jesus, written in urgent, fast-moving Greek. Yet running straight through the middle of the narrative is an unusual motif. Whenever Jesus is correctly identified, he immediately shuts the speaker down. When confronting demons who cry out that he is the Holy One of God, the text records that Jesus rebukes them and demands their silence. He enforces the exact same rule on his closest followers. When the disciple Peter correctly identifies him as the Messiah, Jesus strictly orders the group not to tell anyone. Even at the end of his life, facing trial before the Sanhedrin and the Roman governor Pontius Pilate, he responds to direct questions about his identity with evasive, cryptic answers like, "You say so." Scholars call this phenomenon the messianic secret. It leaves historians and theologians wrestling with a difficult question. Is hiding your defining identity a brilliant PR strategy or evidence of a historical cover-up? The first explanation treats the secret as a practical historical necessity. Jesus was simply managing the clock to ensure his survival. In first-century Judea, words had lethal consequences. Openly claiming the title King of the Jews was a direct challenge to the authority of the Roman Empire, and the standard penalty for sedition was execution. Jesus had a specific agenda. He needed to gather followers, teach in the rural areas of Galilee, and eventually make a highly public journey to Jerusalem. A premature arrest would have cut that mission short. From this perspective, the silence commands were a tactical delay. Jesus kept his identity concealed precisely so he could stay alive long enough to finish what he started. A second theory suggests Jesus did view himself as the Messiah, but knew the public had the wrong definition of the word. To the first-century crowds, a Messiah was supposed to be a conquering warrior king, a new David who would violently overthrow the Romans. Jesus, however, intended to fulfill the role of a suffering servant. If he openly accepted the title too early, he risked either sparking a violent revolt or facing massive misunderstanding among the populace in a highly volatile region. The text of Mark aligns directly with this. Immediately after commanding Peter to keep his identity secret, Jesus begins predicting his own suffering, rejection, and death. The restriction on his title had to remain in place until the crucifixion occurred. Only then would the concept of the Messiah be redefined. A third hypothesis removes the historical Jesus from the equation entirely, arguing that he never claimed the title of Messiah during his lifetime. In 1901, a scholar named Wilhelm Reed published a bombshell thesis. He pointed out that the secrecy motif in Mark's Gospel reads less like a historical memory and more like a perfectly constructed literary plot device. Skeptics point to the fact that Jesus routinely referred to himself in the third person, using the ambiguous phrase, Son of Man. Throughout his public ministry, he acted as a rural teacher and prophet, not a royal claimant. Reed concluded that the belief in Jesus as the Messiah originated with his followers after his death. When the author of Mark sat down to write the Gospel, he had to explain a glaring historical gap. If Jesus was the Messiah, why didn't he ever say so publicly? By inserting the secrecy commands into the story, the author created a clever literary defense mechanism. It protected the early church's theology by explaining away the silence of the historical Jesus. Regardless of which of these 3 theories is historically accurate, the secret itself dictates how the audience experiences Mark's narrative. Throughout the entire text, the people who actually witness the miracles, the massive crowds, and even the inner circle of disciples, failed to grasp who Jesus is. They constantly misunderstand his teachings and intentions. The supreme irony of the gospel is that the only human to openly and correctly declare Jesus as the Son of God, without being told to keep quiet, is an outsider, a Roman centurion. And the centurion makes this declaration at the exact moment Jesus dies on the cross. Whether a pragmatic survival strategy by a first-century rabbi or a brilliant literary device crafted by an ancient author, the effect is identical. The messianic secret forces the reader to stop looking at the miracles and the glory. It insists that you cannot understand who Jesus is until you look at the cross.